Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's Sunday Design Rant. This is episode 10 of this series where I use my game development experience to rant about design aspects in games. Today I'd like to make an observation about first-person shooters. Look back at the early shooters and you'll find plenty of games that a lot of gamers are nostalgic about. At one point I wondered whether this was just plain old nostalgia for nostalgia's sake, or if there was something more to the "they don't make them like they used to's." So I sat down and played through some old FPS games and came to some interesting conclusions, and those conclusions are what I'm going to share with you today. Look at modern first-person shooter games in single-player mode, and in terms of level design you'll find two major styles of layouts. You'll find the linear path style of Call of Duty and many other roller coaster style games, and you'll find more open games with arena-like combat. If we simplify the situation a bit, we can call these corridor games and arena games. The interesting thing about this is that these level designs that dominate the gaming space nearly exclusively were almost never found in the early shooter games. Instead, they all had a level design that you'll almost never find today: the maze. There are a lot of theories you could have as to what the reason behind this is. Maybe the technology of the time could only handle that layout. But look at the game like Dark Forces, the Star Wars first-person shooter, and a personal favorite of mine. It's so old it doesn't even feature full mouse input as a core feature, and yet it still has intricate puzzles with moving platforms and all kinds of fancy traversal. I'd say, instead, what happened was realism. Let's set aside the level design of these games for a while and come back to that later. Instead, let's look at the very first thing you do in these games: movement. Look at any old shooter game. It doesn't matter if you play a superhero or a grunt. Every single protagonist is a jet-powered super machine. And by that I mean the movement speed is through the roof, and you'll regularly find characters able to jump 10-meter gaps. Look at Doom. Someone sat down and calculated the actual running speed of the Marine from Doom, and came to the conclusion that he runs at 80 kilometers per hour. That's 49 miles per hour for the Imperial people out there. This twitchy superhuman speed defies all physics, and Doom doesn't even feature the fastest protagonists of them out there. The speed and jumping ability of these player characters isn't an accident. Slogging around at the speed of the average couch potato just isn't much fun, and running at ridiculously amped up speeds let the designers create levels for these first-person shooters that weren't only about shooting, but also about platforming. Look back at any game from that era, and you'll find nearly all of them included some form of platforming element. Enter realism. With the modern shooter game turning more towards actual warfare as the backdrop, movement speeds and jumping abilities took a backseat to plain old shooting and cover systems. Leaning became a more important feature than traversal, and for a long time, regardless of if the protagonist was your average soldier or a superhuman nanosuit mechanized techno-mumbo-duper soldier, games had you at the speed of a fast, real human, rather than the don't give a beep about realism super bouncers of yesteryear. And that brings us back to level design. This realism shrunk the levels, and with them the possibilities for interesting gameplay. And when your game is all about aiming carefully out from behind a chest-high wall, and taking potshots at the enemy before running at totally human speeds to the next chest-high wall, and your character can vault over walls but not really do any significant jumping, any platforming goes right out the window. And so the modern shooters came to be all about shooting and nothing else. Think about it. The bounce around mechanics combined with the platformy levels of early shooter games meant that the combat in these games was fun, despite AI systems so stupid it's charitable to even call them AI in the first place. Layers of different mechanics could be taught individually and then added on top of each other to create rich gameplay challenges from simple components. Another vital aspect is the heavy interaction of story and gameplay in modern games. Early shooters often had very clear premises and goals, but then very light interaction mid-level. Instead, the maze provided the playing field and players got to figure out the intermediate goals themselves. Red door here, need to find a red key and then come back. Ledge up there with a button, need to find my way around. None of that works if you're not ready to accept the lack of amazing set-piece events of buildings crumbling, And so, in the name of cinematic awesomeness, modern AAA titles do away with that kind of design. In multiplayer, we're only now seeing a slow return to the older form of shooters, with quick traversal and levels where platforming and movement become a vital part of the gameplay. Look at Titanfall and how other games have followed suit. And then most recently the pre-release return of an old classic, Unreal Tournament. So what am I trying to say with this? Is the arena design and the corridor design objectively worse than the maze design? Not inherently, no. But the gameplay in itself in a maze formed games that could include so much more than those designs do. And I think that's why there's some legitimacy to the nostalgia. It isn't just that those games were the first shooters we ever played, and thus we look back at them fondly. There's actually an important difference in how those games were made, and because of that, how they play. Could such a game be made and be successful today? I don't know, to be honest, and I doubt that we'll see any high-profile attempts at finding out anytime soon. What do you think? Please share your own experiences and thoughts in the comment section. My name is slicedlime, and that's the end of the Sunday Design Rant number 10. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.